Okay, good afternoon, all. I suppose first thing to start, Happy New Year to everyone. A bit belated, but welcome back. Great to see a packed audience as we go through. We have this session and we have another one in a couple of hours later. Much in line with the last Q&A sessions, it really will be two things. One, just a quick revamp of what we went over in the last Blueprint 2 event. And then we'll go through the questions that have been sent in and collated to give some answers on those. And then whatever other questions pop up, we'll go through those as the day goes on. You've got me here today because both Bob Verber and Matt Unsworth are unavailable. Therefore, if there's any awkward questions, they will get back to you and I will dodge the bullet, okay? But no, I think we've got enough expertise here to answer most of the questions. I think first things, look, the event was just before Christmas. We've all had time with friends, with family. I know from my own personal case, probably killed a few brain cells that I shouldn't have done in those 4 weeks and forgotten a few things. So I will do a quick revamp of some of the key messages and then we'll go straight to questions. This will be no more than a couple of minutes, okay? So key messages that we went through the Blueprint. One, the build, and we're still on track to deliver the roadmap. We're looking to go live July 1 for phase 1 services. Yes, there's a lot of work to be done between now and then, but there are essentially 4 critical activities that are required that we need the market to work with us and their vendors and their communities in order to deliver those so that go live is as seamless as it can be on July 1st. July 1st will be a period because clearly there will be blackout windows and things like that beforehand. The whole detail of exactly how that will work we will lay out in the Blueprint 2 event in February on the 26th. So exactly what happens on a Monday, what happens on a Tuesday, what happens on a Wednesday as we come through to the end of quarter. We'll cover that event in detail, okay? The 4 key things we asked everybody to start preparing for as we're in the first quarter of 2024. One is test your processes, understand what you've got. We published on the Blueprint 2 website a testing framework that's available for all to go through. We are developing further detail on that alongside Limos, the market associations, Lloyd's, and ourselves. We will have a comprehensive framework and then the test scripts and everything through by February with a view that in March we'll be looking to go through with all market participants. Here's how you onboard. Here's how you get a schedule in the testing rack. Here's the type of testing that's being done. The options on testing are pretty simple. There will be Vanguard will be doing early functional testing, the Vanguard participants, and then going into end-to-end testing. There'll be a Limos run coordinated testing offering, which will be the equivalent of end-to-end, will be end-to-end testing. And then there'll be an offering out there to market participants, which I would call enhanced. If once you've seen what Vanguard's testing, once you've seen what we're going through with the Limos coordinated testing, if there's something that's key to your business or so critical to you that you want to test it more times or in a level of detail or a level of connectivity that isn't covered in those end-to-end tests, there'll be options to do that. Okay, but more on that will come through in the January-February phase. Second one is messaging. Clearly, I go down a simple adage is, can you connect to me? Can you understand me? Can you use me? So the messaging is literally, can you understand me? Are we communicating on messaging formats that you can connect to the system as we put it in place and the system can connect back to you and data can flow in an understandable way? Now the messaging formats are being published from a bespoke perspective. The team will get into that in detail. The standard messaging formats are already out there. They've been out there on the website since December. I think, so let's look around. I know Mr. Bennett's in here from Accord somewhere, hiding at the back. The ASG gateway to give you the ability to connect and do connectivity testing is there now. If you need to go through that and you can't get to Mark or you can't get to me or one of my team, we can help you with that connectivity testing now. The bespoke messaging, we've published the ones that we're going to support. I know there's the odd question popped up is, well, what happens if I want another one? I'm not a closed door on that. If there's viability and volume, please raise that, please come in. We do have a little bit of capacity, but we think we have it covered with the 39. Okay? Next one is training. Clearly the key one is use of the portals. How do they work? How do they go from one screen to the other? That training will be available the second half of Q1 as regards content in one form or another, but really we'll be looking to do training on portal usage in Q2. Reason being is we're trying to find a balance between training people close enough to when they're going to use the technology that the training sticks and the training's relevant, but far enough away from when we go live that there's enough time to train enough people. We're trying to find that balance. Our view of that balance at present is we'll do most of the training, whether it will be online, e-learning, face-to-face, will be done in Q2. And the fourth one is the contract. Clearly, as we cut over from one side of services to another, we need a contract to underpin that. The path that we're on is for the contract package, including its pricing and schedules, to be released to the market at the end of this month. We're on track to do that. That will include pricing, it will include service definitions, it will include here's how things change, here's how things don't change as you look forward. So we're dealing with number one. Number one will come back to you. Sorry, number four is really about, on the contract, is about you getting it signed within your contract, but the full pack will be with you by the end of January. The first two, 1 and 2, is really the work that I would say is really quite pertinent for the first month, 6 weeks of this quarter, is understanding once we give you the testing framework, is there anything else you want to do, any other testing you want to do, anything you think we've missed? We'll have that out to you mid-February, end of February. And then the messaging is start understanding those changes ASAP. What do we need to change with you and your systems? What support do you need from us and our teams to help you do that? If you have questions on that messaging, please go through your engagement teams ASAP. And if that doesn't work and you get stuck, feel free to come direct to myself or the team here that's on the stage to work you through that. Timetable, nothing really changed here from what we announced. Well, nothing's changed from what we put out there in December. Clearly the one change in December was the pushback of phase 2 at the request of the marketplace in order to give essentially a couple of full quarters of phase 1 systems producing phase 1 details and outcomes and financial records. Both sets of technology are on path. Speaking as the CEO of Velanetic, there are added benefits from pushing it back. One, it gives me the ability to put more testing capacity and defect capacity available to the market because I'm not trying to build something in parallel for phase 2. Also, we're working through the phase 2 deliverable. What can we do within the phase 2 deliverable now that we have a little more time that makes it easy to adopt? That's down the path of a wider receipt of eBot messaging and things like that. So we'll be publishing exactly what those changes are and what we're putting into that phase 2 delivery. We'll go through that in some detail in the February event on the 26th, okay? So what does successful delivery? There's really a 3-gate process as we've talked through. Phase 1 is everybody ready to cut over by the end of June. That's a given. If we're going to go live in July 1, in and around that period, everybody has to be ready to go. Now, to be ready to go, we've got to answer 3 questions. Technically, are we ready? Does the platform, does it do what it says on the tin? And is it robust and validly tested that we know we've covered most scenarios that we're not going to walk into a big problem as we launch and stress and put volume through it? We need to be organizationally ready, both on your side of the fence in that are your people ready to use the new portals? Do they understand how they work? Having seen, and I'm a bit ahead of most, having seen the latest working models and drafts, it is a light step change from the portal interaction today. So it is actually very ergonomic, very intuitive, and relatively easy to train. If I can understand it with a few hours training, I'm pretty darn sure that your experts will understand it very quickly. We also have to be ready in the joint venture in Velanetic. Clearly, we are one of the biggest users of this system, and we're going to have to operate day to day in a different environment. So 2 edges on the organizational readiness. And then market readiness is very much down that path. We've got quite a lot of items in there. You know, the regulator has to approve, understand. You need to be comfortable using this technology from that perspective. You need to have your messaging, you need to have your people trained, you need to be ready to move as we go. So a whole readiness tracker will again be covered in a lot of detail in February, but this is what needs to happen and when. And here's the resources available to help you get ready with a view. Now, I am acutely aware there's a lot of work to be done between now and June 30th. But the amount of work we have to do is not massively technical. It really is about people and process and people learning how to use the new portals. Yes, there's technology changes in that we have to repoint URLs and IP endpoints to new servers that host the new platforms. Yes, we have to change some messaging types, which is probably a little more robust and a little more work than most. But fundamentally, this is about people and process change is where we need to get through phase 1. So Q&A focus areas, this is where I get to pass the buck, having talked for way too long. The areas that came up really came in 5 key groupings. You can see them there, so I won't restate them out to you. Those are the groupings of the questions we come through. Steve's going to walk through and coordinate. Here's the questions that came up. Here's where we have answers and thoughts. Whatever questions you have around that, please just follow the usual protocol. Stick your hand up. We'll get a microphone to you at the end of each of those sections. Please tell us who you are and which organization you represent, because if we need a follow-up later, that only but helps. And then we'll answer as many questions as we can. If we can't answer it, we'll definitely be back to you in the next few days, yeah, because we may not have all the depth, depending on how deep you want to go on a question to hand. So at that, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chris. Afternoon. Thank you, Chris. Probably most of you know me. I'm Steve Pallett. I look after the engagement and adoption team here at Lloyds and for Blueprint 2. You obviously know Chris. The other people we have on the panel will be very well known to you, I'm sure already. So starting on the white shirts, we have Ruan, we have Sean and Alvaro. Other people that will be engaging in the session today, whether they like it or not, they're going to be pounced on probably. Ray Johnston from Vanguard. Also got the team of engagement partners here. If you could stick your hands up so everyone can see where you are. So this is a spread of carrier engagement partners, broker engagement partners, and vendor as well. And I may well ask other people, perhaps from associations or anyone else that I think I could pose a question to, especially the difficult ones. So my job is relatively easy, such as Chris's. I can hide behind the podium. I'll direct the questions to who I think is the right person to ask. I'm keen not to go into down the rabbit hole into some very technical questions. We've got time to do that, and we can follow up if you've got some very really difficult questions that I feel that we disengage the audience. I don't want to do that today, so I want to have the real pertinent questions. We do have quite a bit of time, so please don't hold back. I'm sure you won't hold back on asking those questions. You'll see at the back we've got cameras. We are recording this session. We will distribute it. We'll also take a note of all of the questions. And we will build out our FAQ document as we do at the end of every session to make sure that the FAQs we publish to the website are as current as possible and with the answers as well. So a very warm welcome on this cold day. It's great to see so many people here. I think it's more than just the sandwiches that have dragged you here. I'd like to think that is the case. And for those that want to come for a glass of wine later on today, you'd be welcome to come back to the session as well. So plenty of time, and I'm very happy to take questions. As Chris said, if you could state your name and your company, if you're comfortable to do so, that would be really useful. And I'm very happy to take your questions from here on in.
So, thanks, Steve. Yes, my question relates essentially, it's to the messaging part, technical details. It's not a deeply technical question. It's about essentially how much confidence people can have, or rather, how definitive the standards, the specifications for the standard EDI messages that have been published so far can be considered. because I think at the Q&A session on December 11th, there was some perhaps debate about how final those particular specifications are, and in terms of their publication state. So if you could talk to that, that would be really grateful, please.
Okay, no worries. My mic dropped. Can you hear my mic? Perfect, thank you. So from a specification perspective, as we've always said to the market, and we continue to say to the market, we didn't have something to go completely back to that was written down black and white that said that's exactly what the specification looks like. So we had to reverse engineer the specs. You reverse engineer something, you're potentially going to miss one or two things along the way. Now, what we have done to get the accuracy of the specs up is we've engaged with various people to sense check what we've published and feed back to us on are there any issues, any concerns, and lo and behold, as we were expecting, we have found one or two items that need correcting on 3 of our specifications this week. Very minor change coming through this week on its USM, SCM and MCM. So we've withdrawn those specs just for a couple of days. We go and make a small amendment to it so that it does actually reflect what the standard specification should look like, and we'll republish them. Now, these are very minor, small, mainly data field change levels, not actual structural changes. It's just, in this instance, it was a field was concatenated with a semicolon instead of a addition sign. So we just go correct that so that the specs actually do what your systems expect them to do. So we go have that iteration as we go through the process between now and March. Come March, we should be in a position that we're confident enough that we can do wider testing with you guys with them. And if something crops up at that point, we've got between March and June to fix it. That's what testing is all about. So they're as accurate as we can make them today. They're going through first rounds of testing right now. As just mentioned, we've picked up 1 or 2 small defects in them, and we'll correct them as and when we go through them. So we'll do an iterative approach on it with internal testing, Vanguard testing, and then ultimately customer testing with you guys.
Thank you for the question, Marek. And to follow on from that, when you've republished them, we will send out those details to everybody.
Exactly, on the
and
website.
we will have a cover sheet or something similar which will direct everybody to what the changes are on the specifications, just in case there's any doubt on that. Thank you. Any questions leading on? Yes, hello.
Hello, I'm Adam Smith from Atrium. Yeah, just a quick one. Do we have any more detail on the timings we can expect for the kind of Limos-supported coordinated and enhanced testing kind of plan and what that's going to entail and what that's going to give us in terms of a more specific date?
Yeah.
So the path we're on is really just thinking monthly. Yeah? So January, get the framework, get the scope of the testing worked through. February, get the test scripts, make sure those are clear what we're trying to test, how we're going to test it. It's about the coordination of the governance as much between Limos on a coordinated test, but also Vanguard and anything enhanced, because in certain cases they'll be testing the same things, and therefore the governance, and let's call it an operational layer above it that says we're learning from all 3 and we're relaying information back into all 3 is key. That'll all be clear in February. With a view then in March, we'll be looking to work through scheduling of who, what, when, where, from end-to-end testing through essentially April, May, and June, yeah? So that's the timeline in a rough monthly basis.
Thanks, Chris. Ray, anything to add on that with your role on Vanguard and testing?
Only I'll have
There we go.
only to say that Vanguard will be preceding the Limos testing, and we'll be sharing all of the scope and outputs that Vanguard has found with the Limos plan.
Thank you.
Matt Baker, Generali. Hello, Steve. Just quickly, we spoke last time about the PRA sign-offs, regulatory sign-offs and stuff like that. Obviously, having had experience of that, these things take quite some time. Is that possibly that it would delay this further or not?
I wouldn't say from a delay perspective. I mean, I know that this is well being looked into, so it's not something that's been forgotten about. Chris, you've probably got the best interaction with Lloyds and through the risk team.
I knew I agreed to do this for a reason, but I didn't realize it was every question. But hey, no, so on PRA and then FCA, I should say. First contacts with them was made on numerous fronts, both through the LMA in their capacity, Lloyd's in their capacity, and I do believe certain individual customers before Christmas. Yeah, we've produced a standard, what I'd call deck, which covers really 3 or 4 key questions. One, here is a functional and location overview from, say, a resiliency GDPR perspective. That's key. Here's a timeline on implementation and testing that we're going to go through. And then here is the governance and cutover process as regards how do we go through before we can say, yes, it's now to the market, this is ready to use. Is there enough of an audit trail there that we can support each market participant, either through its associations or through its governing body, say in Lloyd's case, or from Velinetic? All of that information, as we pull it through, will be made available. Now, look, if something pops up, could there be a delay? I can't see the questions at present. I think we'll be okay, but truth will come through over the next few months. Our goal is really to give the market 2 real key things. A clear path over the next 6 weeks that says, here's the information that will be available when, to give that governance and that PRA comfort. And here's when it will come to you, and then to the extent we can, here's what's going on with other bodies as regards their interactions, whether it's PRC. That way everybody's got the same information. Worst thing for them is I've got 450 market participants going in with 450 different views, as opposed to everybody going in with somewhat of a standard view with standard information, yeah? And, if we're not ready, we're not ready. It's as simple as that, yeah? If we are ready, then it's a governance process that we'll run.
Thanks, Chris. Before we pass across to, I know everyone wants to hear from Sean and Alvaro. I certainly do. I can see you're dying to get involved. Chris, one more question for you as you've got the mic on the DPSA. Perhaps we can just give a quick update to everybody here about when the DPSA will be sent out and what that looks like.
Okay, so I covered a little bit in the opening statements. So just so we level set everyone, we operate today and receive services today from Velinetic under an agreement we've called FERN. Yeah. As we cut over to digital services on July 1st, that agreement falls away, and the DPSA, Digital Processing Services Agreement, it's nothing more creative than that, kicks in from July 1. Okay, so we are getting a contract out to you, which has gone through the legal reviews, both from IUA and their external counsel, LMA and their external counsel, Lloyd's and Velinetic and its external counsels. This is for market participants, let's call it, and underwriters, that goes through, here's the frame contract, which has all the terms that you would see in a normal frame contract, who it applies to, what are limits of liability, what happens if this happens, that happens, what's a change request, how's it managed, etc. It then has a load of annexes and scopes of work that hang off it. Those scopes of works will be what is important to you, because that's the service we'll be looking to deliver to you under the new contract. Now, we're going to pre-populate those for you with the services we deliver to you today. They will be marked up very clearly. Here's the core services we deliver to you today. Here's the optional services or elective services, if you want to use that language, that we deliver to you today under the FERN contract. Do you want to continue? Do you not want to continue as service goes forward? Within that will also be a whole load of annexes on here's how messaging works, here's how this works, and we'll probably add to it at a later stage more detail on phase 2 that cuts over in July. But basically the whole pack is due at the end of the month. What we need back from you as market participants is, one, a signed MSA. The MSA is only effective, just so we're all clear, when we cut over. So if we don't cut over on July 1st, it isn't effective on July 1st. So it will have a trigger point that says this contract becomes effective at the point we cut over to digital services. And at that point, the scopes of work become active and those services go through. It will also have a price book attached to it, so I don't dodge that question. That price book will lay out, here's the new pricing, which we believe is better than the old pricing. as we go through that. That's really it. The only other thing I'd add on DPSA, we've sent the draft contract for the brokers, went out just before Christmas. That's being reviewed this week with 3 or 4 of the, let's call them a broker panel, to see if there's anything in there that's causing red eyes or angst. Not expecting anything, if I'm perfectly honest. And then that contract will be ready to go with a view that we send the broker package out at the same time at the end of January.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. So the DPSA will go to probably the usual point of contact at each market firm who will look after whether it's compliance, contracting, procurement. And we've also asked for a copy to be sent to the Blueprint 2 champion. So if you're one of the champions from the firms, you know who it's gone to, and you can just keep track of that as well, which we thought was a good way of making sure that we're kind of, from a project perspective, we're on it, and hopefully that will help you. Thank you for the update on that. I'm dying to get Sean and Alvaro involved in the conversations as much as they are. Do we have some more technical questions? Anything around? Yes, at the back.
Hi, sorry. I'm Paula from DocoSoft Vendor. The question I've got is around, we know the new platform's being built from spec. We have identified, the right back vendors have identified an issue in the IMR around access control lists, which is being looked at by DXC now and resolved now. And the concern, I guess, is that that change was missed with the IMR replatform. Is that fix going to then be populated into the new platform so we don't have the same issues ongoing?
We'll have to come back to you on that one, Paula. I'm not entirely sure of the timeline on the fix and on the code that will be moved to the cloud. So we'll have to come back to you on that one. Yeah.
Thanks.
Got another one.
Hi there, Steve Flint from Resolute Management. Couple of things. One was just to clarify what Chris was just saying about the DPSA and that kicking in from July onwards. My previous understanding was that we were aiming to get that signed by the end of Q1 in order to go into testing. So has that changed now?
No, look, I think 2 different things, yeah? Getting signing as early as possible, please. It'll only be effective when we cut over, yeah? So think of it as a contract that's signed, but it only becomes effective once the services starts to be delivered, which is when we cut over. To the second part of the question is, am I limiting access to testing if I don't have a signed contract? The answer is no, we're not.
Great.
That's a change, okay?
That was what I was looking for.
Yeah, I thought it was. Yeah.
The second question was just about the testing and training timeline, because one of the takeaways at the last session was, given the fact that training materials and testing materials weren't due out until end of March, kind of May time. I think you said earlier, Chris, there was now going to be some training material available from mid Q1. Yep. So what will that comprise exactly?
So we're trying to get the first drafts out of the training material to do, let's call it process walkthroughs, so you can see how the things look. It will probably use the drafts, and I'm trying to be careful how I use the wording here. Let's call it the beta test of the portals as opposed to the final version, but there'll be 80 by that time, so that we can at least get people familiarized with, here's the process change, here's the portal change, before we then go into full training. So trying to get as much, let's call it pre-read out there as we can, and pre-visual out there as we can. Yeah.
Okay, that'll be helpful. And there was also some mention of possibly trying to arrange some walkthroughs or demos of the portals during Q1 as well. So that's still on the cards.
Yeah, we'll put something on the Blueprint 2 website in the next week or so of slots where people can come in as a group, and we'll literally put it on that lovely big screen that we have on G4 now. So my advice is bring your sunglasses, because if we put a white background on there, it'll blast your eyes out. But we'll walk you through, essentially, here's the alpha version as opposed to the beta version of the portals, and you'll see how they do move and how they interact. And we'll just do that as an information session.
That's great, thanks. And just on that, from the 11th of December, we took away a very strong desire from everybody that you want to see the portals, and of course, why wouldn't you? You need to do that. It would be a good thing for you to be able to show your people that you've got working with you what they're going to expect to see. It's good to get the early familiarization we're looking about how best to deliver that. I mean, as Chris says, the screen up in the Velonetic space, you're very welcome to come up and visit that. If you can coordinate via your engagement partner, and then we'll make sure that the space is available. We've got an agenda that we'll run through with you, and we'll make sure that you're fully facilitated when you come up. If there's another way that we can do that for those that perhaps aren't in London, then we are looking at doing that, whether it's videos or some other kind of access. But our preferred thing, if you want to come and see it, if you want to bring your people along, your team along, then organise that via your engagement partner. Thank you. Who's next? Yes.
Hello, Sushant from MS Amlin.
Hi.
This is with regards to the testing tools and the framework part of it, right? So what we understand is Zephyr is the tool that you'll be using. What's the process of onboarding, and when would you be sharing more details on how the test process and defect management would actually take place?
Yep, great question. Ray, you've stood up. Does that mean that you want to answer?
Yes, please. MS Amlin is using Zephyr as a part of the Vanguard testing. So the business scenarios went out just before Christmas. We are building those out with you at the moment. The version of the software that we'll be using to test is currently in our own acceptance testing cycle. So we will be creating those tests and onboarding you onto Zephyr in February with a view of getting you started towards the end of February in actually doing your initial, I think as Chris described it, the initial functional tests.
Thank you, Ray. Yes.
It's Marcel Nauix from Munich Re. I had a question on business continuity at Velonetic. Could you perhaps shed a bit more light on your own efforts to provide business continuity and contingency planning for the cutover?
Yes. So we have there is 2 work streams going on at the moment. For the first is the cutover work stream. So we are aiming to publish in the next market event that it's scheduled for the beginning of February, an exact cutover plan. Because the cutover is not a day, it's a period really. There will be a series of blackout dates. There is a series of testing when we, for example, migrate documents from the IMR to the cloud, and we have to test all of these things. So there's a few activities and day-to-day activities that would happen during that cutover period. During that period, there's a few gates where we can roll back, and so if something catastrophically happens, then we can roll back to the previous systems. The second work stream is exactly on that. We call it the doomsday scenario planning. So what happens if it doesn't go well? What are the options and how we can mitigate those in the cutover plan and before? So there's 2 sets of work streams that we have. The cutover plan will be published to the market between the end of January and the beginning of February for that market event. You'll see how the blackout dates and how messaging, when do you have to exactly move from one gateway to the other, and when you have to exactly start using the new portals. And then there will be an addendum on the rollback plan because that is part of our business resilience.
And then from a run perspective, so we have a disaster recovery program that we run now, so that's being updated. So where we have physical mainframes and we have replicas of physical mainframes elsewhere in the country, we're going to be using AWS to create a backup for that. So I think we have 2 backups. So we have the main cloud server that we run from, and we'll have 2 backups if they're ever needed. And all of our workforce are remote, so we have a really good disaster recovery perspective approach from a sort of a run standpoint.
Thank you. It's a good question. We will make sure that this is covered off in the FAQ document as well. It is a frequently asked question, so we make sure we've got the appropriate wording in the document.
Just to add, it's key for the PRA FCA. Yeah. I think that's where you're going.
Hiya, Dawn Simpson from Guy Carpenter. When are we looking to get end users and licenses set up ready for 1.7?
So for training, So for training purposes, you have three, let's call it 3 steps. So for testing, it will be between in March. So we'll start in March onboarding testing for users for testing to start the customer testing phase between April, May, and June, correct? That's for testing. For training, we will also start in March and then continue into April and May. So that way your permanent users that just need to train, they don't need to test the machine, they just need to, those will start being onboarding in the training environment between March and as well April. For the final onboarding, so the actual live environment and your final users, there's a set of activities that need to happen before the cutover. So first of all, you have been issued, I think through your engagement partners, every customer and every participant has been issued a list of users that you currently have. So there's a cleansing exercise that we are expecting from every customer to happen in the next couple of months. And then there will be a period when there will be a mini, it's a technical onboarding process that we have previous to a cutover. So that way, let's say that you have 1,000 users in Guy Carp that use, claims, premiums, and lures. They will now we will onboard them before the cutover period in July. So that means that when the system goes live, they're in. They have a username and password.
Have I misunderstood? Because my understanding was that we were responsible for setting up all the licenses now. So we've got to get the framework behind that before those dates. Is that correct?
So the way that the party system work in the new platform, so yeah, and let me explain this to the rest of the customers, is you have 3 types of users as a customer. You have system users, so that's when you send me messaging and I send you messaging. So these are machine credentials, let's call them that way. Then you have admin users, and then you have regular users. Admin users, of course, these are your IT admins or your operational admins. And then your regular users will be your claim handlers, your premium handlers, your insurance handlers. In the new system, Velonetic, we set up for the customers the machine users, or the technical users, and the admin users. But now every customer will be in control of onboarding or deboarding in the platform your own users. This is much better and an improved process of what it is today. Today, customers actually create a support ticket, and then our IT team actually creates or deboards or deletes a user for you, and it takes time. So sometimes if you have somebody that has to be kicked out of the system immediately, it takes time. In the future, you will be fully in control. That means that you can change permissions, you can add users, you can remove users at your own pace. So yes, the answer to your question of regular users, yes, they have to be created by these admins for every confirmation.
Just say, but verified by their admin user.
Yeah, of course, and verified by your admin user, of course.
And I think just so Alvaro mentioned the cutover plan. So at the moment, we don't have definitive dates for any of this stuff, sort of, in terms of what the blackout dates are going to be, how long they're going to be, when the last day of submission is going to be, when the new system's going to be live, in order for you to, because we're going to have to put the system live to get the users into it before we can actually use it. So once that cutover plan's finalised and we have that timeline, you will then know what that window is for you to request your admin users, us to set the admin user up, and then you'll have that period of time before the actual cutover goes live for your administrators to then set up your individual users. So it's a date that we don't know at the moment, but once that cutover plan is produced, I think you said at the end of the month?
Yes, that probably should.
You will then be able to then plan how best to approach your user setup piece.
And regarding the admin, we'll be sending an email, it'll probably come from Velonetic next week. That will kick off the process, asking firms to identify who would be doing the administration on your systems. It will also accompany a list of relatively short questions regarding training needs, training requirements. So that will be coming out next week. We didn't do it this week because we've issued, as you know, if you're a Blueprint 2 champion, our adoption readiness questionnaire. So that will be coming out next week. One of the things we talked about, the portal, I think you mentioned, Alvaro, we've probably engaged with around about 2/3 of all the carrier market in terms of all the portal access. Wendy, keep me true if I'm not right. It's around about 2/3 we've got to so far. From the broking side, where we're starting that exercise now, if you want to have a walkthrough of all of those users that you've got that use portals in your organisations if you reach out to your engagement partner, and we can get that scheduled in.
Has that answered your question?
Not fully.
Do you want to try again, or should you want to catch
it's
up?
more about, at the moment, we may have, read-only access and different functionality under those. Will we still have that at day one? Because
So there are different access types, and we will issue training to the administrators in how to use the system and how to set those users up appropriately.
so can we do the pre-work on that? Can we see what those users are? Because, some
In
of
what they
them
have today?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure that's something we can get to. So I don't know if that's included in the current list that we're sending out in terms of the access that they have. No, okay, so we can update those lists so you can see what they currently have.
I don't think we've had a list. I don't know if anybody else has, but I don't think we've seen those lists yet.
So we're starting on the brokers now, so it will be, if you reach out to Neil or Mike, we'll make sure we get that scheduled in for you. Okay. Yeah, right.
Hello, sorry, Paula, this is also slightly more complicated for you because you're part of Vanguard. So we're actually onboarding you at the moment onto the Vanguard environment with those initial test users. So you're actually going to see all of this and start your user onboarding for Vanguard testing in February. So. But be reassured you're going to see and be able to use that portal in February as part of the Vanguard testing, so you'll see what it's capable of doing, and then we can onboard it with you for the rest of your users.
And I think that's a valid point, but we do need to consider the amount of effort that as an onboarding activity, customers are going to have to time box resource to actually create all of these users. So that's one of the things when we're looking at what you need to do, and we're very good at looking at what we need to do. One of the things that you are going to need to do is do that. And there's so many reasons this is a benefit. I've always mentioned some of them, but it's also really great in terms of, you have more control, but also because the authentication is better on the platform, we cannot set a password on your behalf anymore. So actually what the platform does when the user is created by the admin user, an email is sent directly to the user that you've set up so that they can set up the password from their own password. So we're not having to do this thing where we set everything as password with a capital P and then there's a risk of it getting lost. When the administrator actually creates that profile, the finalised steps of it, which is password creation and authentication, is actually done by the end user. So there's loads of benefits to it, but you're absolutely right. There is an additional, we need to time box a piece of, a task where we actually have to get through the onboarding process on this. And for some of the larger companies, that is going to be a relatively significant piece of work.
Sorry, just another follow-up on that same process itself. Would this be a batch upload possible?
Unfortunately, we can't do a batch upload for the authentication reason. It has to be done on an individual basis.
Well, currently at the moment, obviously, is cost per user. Myself and Steve obviously discussed that, I think, this week. Does that cost per user change on the new system?
As far as I'm aware, it's not a cost per user per se, is it? Is it a banded?
It's banded, I think.
I think it's banded.
Is that how it is? Right.
We'll take
Yeah.
the question and come back. It's banded based on usage groups.
Right, okay.
So you're a medium, high, low user, and then I think when you become, there's a different price bracket depending on how big a user you are. But it's all in the price book, so when you get that contract, it'll be detailed within there.
Thank you.
Simpson from Guy Carpenter. Where the processes are different across the bureaus for claims, like the ECF screens are different, and we're now pulling it all into one platform so it all looks the same, how do we know which bureau process you're going to follow?
So you'll follow the same process as you do, and as long as you identify what you're doing, so whether the premium is identified, so when you upload something and you create a policy record for it, you will have to tell the system what bureau you're working on behalf of. I don't think that's any different to today. When the claim then comes in, because it's referenced in the UMR, it's going to pull some of that information into ICOS, and depending on what that bureau is, and even sometimes the class of business, it will then hide the fields you don't need and present you with extra ones if that's the case. So although the system is complete and it's one place, there are still, we call them sort of like a guard in terms of what you can and can't see based on what you're trying to do. So the information that you need to present or the information that you see isn't going to be any different to what you see today in that bureau workflow. Does that make sense? So
yeah, it was just on the process maps, reinstatements weren't mentioned at all.
Okay. So
not in the premiums, not in the claims, so I was just...
Okay, I'll take that on because we have a process for reinstatement, so if they're not in the published maps, we'll make sure that they get added.
I guess there's quite a few questions similar to that. Without actually seeing the portals or having time in front of them, you don't know what it looks like. So that's one of the important things where we need to do that, and it will become clear. I have seen some of the portals, and as an ex-user myself from a broking side, I can absolutely categorically say that much cleaner, much easier UI they'd be working from, rather than flipping between the different screens as we do in the current world. What other questions do we have? Frank.
Hi, Frank McGonagall-White from MS Amlin. I had a question around sort of QA and testing. So obviously we had the robust testing framework that came out this week. And some of the challenges we have, obviously to the regulator, we've got our own responsibilities from a material outsourcing position, and we've got to get the board comfortable that the black box that is the build, is fully QA'd. Can you tell us a little bit more detail about what QA is taking place, and will we have any transparency of the testing from the machine and the QA?
Let me answer that one, yeah. Because I don't see either you three wanting to answer that one, so I'll deal with it. Look, the QAA, let's answer the first question. So the second part of the question first. Will there be transparency? Yes. So the QAA reports, as I go through the three gates, so the first one being technically, does the kit do what it says it's in? That goes through a whole load of UAT testing. It then comes down to a QAA report from PwC that says, does it function? When we publish exit criteria from UAT, which is number of P1s, P2s, P3s, just so we're clear, there's no P1s and P2s, is the exit criteria. All of that will be published through the QAA report. We will make that visible into the portals and to the customer sets through the website to the extent we can. So there'll be more than enough information there. Clearly, I've got elements of it's a third party doing it, therefore there's some confidentiality, but to the extent that we can publish it, you can see the exit criteria, that'll be there. Same on the Velinetic readiness to use these news portals. That's done by PwC as QAA as well. As regards market readiness and the QAA on the end-to-end testing, that'll be a combination of, I suppose, market associations, Limos and Alex Partners are doing the QAA. All of those will be published. Likewise, there is I suppose a work stream in regards PRA, FCA underway on behalf of the market that Lloyd's are leading from a Lloyd's perspective as a quasi-regulator. We're working with them, Velinetic, as we go through that. That information will be published as well, which says here's some of the presentations that have been made, PRA, FCA, which is why we believe we've got to through the governance process, a go, no-go to go forward, because clearly regulatory is one of those legs. Now, exactly how we go through that, we use it across different market participant sets. Some are Lloyd's members, some are LMA members, some are dual stamp, some are IUA, some are neither member of H, some are brokers, etc. We'll lay out the best we can that says here's the information available. Clearly through the next 2-3 months as we get the DPSA out, to the extent that becomes, well, what more do you need? Testing is there to do that, and there'll be as much of the QAA material as we can give that says, do you need anything more? So the quicker we get to it, if there's more needed, then more's needed, yeah? We will get to an interesting point in time, so let's have the grown-up conversation now, where I'm expecting to be hit by a question at some point in time, which is 99% of the market's all ready to go and 1% isn't. What do you do? Yeah, we'll deal with that when we get to it, okay?
And the two PwC reports, so the first one about the build and then the second regarding BPS, BPO readiness.
Yes, PwC QA reports, one Alex Partner report.
Yeah, is that April time?
Pardon?
Is that April time?
So the way we're working through it is there'll be readiness reporting, let's call it, and I use that in small inverted commas. So between February, March, April, May, June, there's no point me doing a big reveal on May 15th and go, we're ready to go. So we'll be publishing interim QAA reports with the documentation from February onwards on each of the 3 gates, which will be publicly available. That way people can get comfortable, get your boards comfortable, get your responsibles who are responsible for that stuff, get them comfortable on the process that it's on track, it's making sense. If queries turn up. We'll deal with that rather than do a big reveal that is the final QAA report, we're good to go. That doesn't help anyone by giving you a very compressed timeline because there's a big unveil. So the idea is to build the credibility as we go.
Thanks, Chris. Very helpful.
Hi, I'm Chris Durham from Riverstone. I'm wondering, in this second round of testing, March, April, whenever that was, how much scope is there for us to be proactive in choosing what tests we run and determining how those will go? I'm imagining that in the Vanguard testing, it's very prescriptive, but how much flexibility is there for us to design our own tests and challenge the system in ways that we feel we need?
So I can take that. So you are fully in control of what you want to test between April and June. So your test plan is your own. However, it's important to note that every transaction that we do in the market requires either one or several parties on the other side. So if you're testing claim queries and you either don't have a broker or you don't want to mimic the broker, then of course you're a little bit alone. Or if you want to test a consortia, well, you might need 3 other carrier partners, right? Or depending on what you want to test, the coordination and the planning of that battery of tests might need a bit of coordinating with the others. However, the environment will be there. So if you want to...
Just on that point, you have the option, yeah? The Vanguard will be doing that. The Limos Coordinated will be doing that. You can also do it under your enhanced self-serve. So the choices are yours.
Yeah. So the limitations, the constraints will be who's there to play, basically. Yeah.
And if you're fully sufficient, let's say that you're a mimic, let's say that you are a broker and you're just testing DRI premium submissions, you don't need anybody else. You can do it by yourself. You want to test that on a Friday at 12 p.m., you can do it.
Or if you have a service company, so you could have service company submissions and then your carrier would be able to agree it. So there's lots of ways you can get around it.
So we're a run-off company, so we believe we manage claims in many different ways, so that's why we think we need various different routes to test. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Hi, Paul Calvert, Morning Data, Verisk. Something Chris sort of like hinted at there with like the last 1%. Have you done any gap analysis on engagement? You've done a lot of events, great, lots of people here, great, lots of communication, great. Have you identified some companies that might be lagging behind on their engagement that you want to drag up and get up to speed with everyone else?
Yeah, I'll take that. Thanks, Paul. So you will have seen, if you are a Blueprint 2 champion and vendors, you would have had, I think, Marek, you've sent it today, haven't you, to vendors. So every Blueprint 2 champion, whether you're a company market carrier, managing agent or broker, would have received now a questionnaire. We were tracking readiness on a quarterly basis last year, so through the entirety of last year, and I think we probably started one off the year before that, but quarterly. We've gone to a monthly basis now, so we're tracking, or we're asking for a number of questions to be answered monthly. So we've got 6 months, so we've got 6 questionnaires coming back. Out of that, we have about 100 questions, give or take, 100 questions in total to ask. Now, we've shared those with everybody in advance, but we're asking on a monthly basis. This first month, January, it's about 30 questions I think we've asked the market. Now, we'll be taking much more notice of the responses we get. Not to say that we didn't before. You will have seen that we published the responses of the questionnaires on the Blueprint 2 website last year. This year is much more detailed, the questions that we're asking, and we'll be taking more action off the back of the responses that we receive. So we have a targeted support model in place we have had for, 6-9 months or so of last year. And we'll be making sure that as we go through each and every return that we get from the market, we'll look at all of the themes that are in common, what we need to improve, what we need to get better on, what we need to focus on, and going into individual organisations as well, and assisting you in your own journey where there is that gap and where we feel that we need to do some more work. So that's covering the broker and the carrier side, but also on the vendor side. So it's a much reduced question set vendors, but we're also very, very keen to track where you are in your build and in your plans to make sure that when we get to the 1st of July, in fact, when we get way before the 1st of July, that we're in good position to proceed and we can press the button. Thanks, Paul. Helen.
Helen Howard-Knight from Aon. Is there any further information around in-flight items, so and the clear down of that and transfer?
I'm definitely passing this
So-
on to you guys.
So there will be as part of the cutover plan. So we're looking at all the scenarios at the moment. We want to try and keep what we migrate to a minimum because it keeps the risk low for us and for you. So that's the ultimate goal. However, we've already identified at least 4 scenarios where we're not going to be able to do that. So things where we've got partially agreed claims, deferreds, instalments. There are a number of scenarios where we know we're going to have to migrate that data and not rely on reach back. So we're working with our operations team to help us with that. And as part of the cutover plan, that will be published. So when that does come out, I mean, it's for everybody to review and check, and nothing that we ever send out is ever in stone. So we'll always expect you to give feedback to us, but make sure that we have thought of all the scenarios. And if there's anything that you think that we might need to be aware of prior to that, obviously drop me an email and we can include that. But we're looking now at how we can manage stuff that really needs to be in the new system before we go live.
So important on that is we have a request to the market and we need everybody to help us on this. Before the cutover, one of our biggest efforts would be to clean house. So there's a bunch of statics, queries that have never been answered. To clean house, we need to clean house before we move. And we need the market to do the same as well. So in your WIP, in your things that have been there forever and ever and ever, things that have, before the cutover, the cleaner that we get to that point, the better it would be for everybody. Because again, if we have 10,000 items or we have 1,000 items, then the risk profile is completely different. So we would like the market to also help us in this cleansing exercise of anything that is outstanding before we go to cutover. Yeah.
And will that sort of be published, I guess, almost like a more detailed guidance around what is required and exactly what actions are needed? So, for example, what will happen if things are just left there? Is it a case of you have to do a lot of activity to close them down, or can you kind of just leave the ones that should be closed down but not go through the effort of it? So I think some real detail around what actual action is needed and because how much effort will need to go into that.
And it is really, sorry, go on.
And we will also publish the dates on, for example, if you need to settle on this date before or after the cutover, when do you have to submit your premium in order to, so we will publish those dates a bit like we did with the data center migration, that you would have dead drop dates where you knew, okay, if I don't do it here, then I need to jump into the next cycle when the system is live.
But you're right, and maybe, Denny, as part of the packs, we need like a checklist of to-do lists around query responses and that kind of stuff, because I think that would be really helpful. That's our biggest issue. We have so many unresponsive queries, and some of them are over 40 days old. And so what we need to do is work out a plan for how we deal with those, and then if they're not dealt with, what we're going to do with them. And the likelihood is that we would just reject them. So that's going to ultimately result in more work. So if we can do the clean-up exercise, then hopefully we're not going to get in the way of the claims and the premiums progressing.
Thank you. I did see another hand somewhere. Oh, hi.
Marcela from Breed. I just want to clarify, I want to ask about the 4-door approach that you shared back in November, I think, October time. There were some couldn't do with the new portals that are coming into place. Is that document still the case, or has it been updated? Because I understood that there was some pushback from the market as well.
So there's been no change to what you can and can't do officially. How was that feedback? How was that feedback given? And then I'll follow that up, because I haven't.
I haven't heard of any pushback to it. I'm not saying that it didn't, but this is the 4-doors approach for the training went live on, I think, the 1st of November, wasn't it? And that was the first launch of training material. I didn't hear of any pushback on that.
Can we take that one offline? Yeah, let's take that one offline and get the feedback from you and just understand exactly what it was, because it's catching all of us off guard here. I don't think any of us are aware of feedback on that. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
I'm not entirely sure it reached us, but if it does, we'll find out where it is. But thank you.
Sorry, Sushant again from MS Hamlin. I appreciate the amount of effort that you're putting in. There are too many dates with the onboarding, the cutover, and all these things. Is there a central place where you can actually have all these dates marked out, or when you actually plan to release the dates for whatever it is to come for future, so that we can keep track of things?
So if I'll start with that. So did you get the pack from the deck that we presented on the 11th of December as a starting point? So that will be, that's the kind of the rigid pack or the rigid set of dates for now. We are moving, and we do move at a pace. There's probably an opportunity to do something more now with more detail. I don't think there's any, I'm looking at Denny as well, we haven't got anything that we've produced currently, have we?
So the idea to produce essentially a critical path, yeah? So to get to July 1st, this has got to be done by these dates. Yeah, we'll get a draft of that out towards basically the end of this month, because I think the first one's not far away. It'll iterate as we go, but that will come through. It'll be on the Blueprint 2 website, so everybody knows where they can go at worst case, and then it'll go through the engagement partners and the CRMs to the extent you don't have an engagement partner, and out to the associations, and then we'll reiterate it as we go. Yeah, but without stating the obvious, everything's urgent, and some things are a little more urgent than others at this point in time. And we're trying to make sure we're saying, look, let's not lose anything that people need to get done in January. I'll worry about what people need to get done in April and May, in February, and then we'll iterate as we go, yeah?
But let's make it our roadmap, right? So if there's dates on there, or there's not dates on there that you think are important to you, tell us what they are. Yep. We can add them to it. This has to be useful. This isn't just us telling you stuff. It has to be a two-way thing, and we have to use it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't echo enough what Sean says over there. There's something that you guys are interested in and you think we need to meet a particular date on and has got an impact on your company, let us know and we'll put it on a plan to track it.
Thank you. And just for Chris's point, you should all have an engagement partner. If for whatever reason you think you don't or you're not sure, please do come and see me after the session, or email me steve.pallet@lloyds.com, and I'll tell you who your engagement partner is. And in the very unlikely event you don't have one, we'll find one for you. Thank you.
Mark Marder, UIB. Regarding the in-flight claims advices, presently we utilise the claims awaiting action availability within CLASS to review and action outstanding claims. Which are either pending, queried, errored, or whatever. I mean, you mentioned about cleansing the data. Would it be possible for a list of the items in their waiting action to be circulated to brokers to review and action before the cut over to the new platform?
We can definitely look at ways to identify actions. I mean, I don't think the awaiting actions list would necessarily work for everybody, but we can definitely look at if it would be helpful for the market to be given a list of these are the things that you have outstanding and the action required against it. We can look at a relatively quick way of us producing that and getting that out to you, and we can use Steve's team to distribute that.
Yes, because obviously as we move on to the new platform, a lot of the claims might be pending due to sanctions.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of reasons. So just to be really clear, there are some absolutely fundamentally legitimate reasons that claims do not move. And those claims we will have a plan for. It's the ones that really we need to, sort of try and wrap up, or there's outstanding queries and we don't really know what the direction is. And we don't need to close the claim, we just need to resolve the transaction. Because it's the transaction that causes the problem. Because once the transaction is complete, and it's complete within the mainframe, that data is accessible to us via the reach back functionality. It's only where that transaction is actually physically in flight. And when we do that cutover, we're not going to have any idea at what stage in the process that in-flight transaction is. So it doesn't need to be a claim resolution, it just needs to be at a transaction level.
Can I have a further question, if possible? Regarding claims just generally, I haven't seen, or I might have missed details of what claims data tags and fields are going to be required to be populated for the new portal. I don't know if there's a list of what tags that need to be moved onto the messaging system.
So do you mean in terms of limclams that are coming in? Do you use it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as we move on to digitalised platform, the limclim ECF messages contained within the ECF structured file will contain quite a lot of the data. I'm just wondering, you know, what other fields might need to be populated to comply with a digital platform.
So I would love to say that there's lots and that we've revamped all the messaging and it's now got loads of different digital stuff in it, but actually it's exactly the same as it is today. So for ease of adoption, we're keeping all the EDI messages as they are today, because to try and do a major re-platform and try and uplift the messaging at the same time, it felt like too big of an Everest. So the messaging as it is today, all the tagging, all the data that you submit as a broker is exactly the same. And all of the BSMs, EDIs that come out the back of it, again, all exactly the same. The change to messaging comes in phase 2. So when we start introducing EBOT and ECOT messages, there are going to be different structures, different tags, and different ways of submitting the data. But for phase 1, carry on as you are.
Okay, so basically we will be good to go from 1st of July because there won't be any major implications.
I mean, the only change is where you're going to get that message from and where you're going to send it. So the endpoint will change, so you'll need to reconfigure that, yeah.
It is worth noting that the new functionality in the claims area will be available in the portal. So there is new bells and whistles. So we have, so we have the test payments, we have claims started, so settlements that can be started by a carrier, for example, that's a new functionality. There's a few things that are brand new. Of course, a limclim, an old limclim cannot handle that as a submission, so it's only available in the portal to use that new functionality.
And to carriers. So for brokers, it remains very much as it is today, but carriers will have additional functionality. So you can close a claim, you can update carrier reserves. So there's a few things that you can use the portal for. They're optional. None of them are mandatory. If you're a portal user, you can use it and the messaging can accommodate it. But yeah, from an input perspective, it's all very much as it is today.
And Mark, I know you will be having conversations with the gentleman 2 rows back. If that gentleman, Mark, if you've got any questions on any of this, of course, engage with Marek and we can get the answers to you. Okay. I don't want to ignore the gallery as well. No, we don't have a microphone up the top there, but if you've got any questions up there, if you read them out to me, I'll repeat them so we've got them recorded and then we can get them answered. So please do raise your hand if there's any questions you'd like to ask. In the expensive seating at the top. Okay. Vicky. So do we have a solution for the parallel UCR question? So quite a big question, thank you. Who would like to take that?
I don't mind taking that. Who'd like to take that one? So the rumours are true. Parallel UCRs are going. So parallel UCRs, and I'm sorry if you've heard me say this before because I feel like I'm on repeat, they were a workaround that we introduced many, many years ago to allow people other than brokers and carriers into the system and to inhibit their access to the claim files but allow them to collect fees. We've removed that workaround because it's a bit nasty and it doesn't really work in terms of having a flat claim file that's consolidated, but we haven't removed the access for experts and fee collection agencies. So although it's not formalised yet, and we're working on a CCN that will get this into the contract for delivery for Go Live, experts will be able to retain their ability to be able to raise a fee as well as fee collection agencies. So we are giving carriers the ability to do this themselves, so that is an option. For maybe things that you want paid quickly or for things that you want control of. But actually your fee collection agencies and your experts themselves, if they go through the registration process, so for those that are already part of Central Settlement and have a CSN and have been onboarded, they will automatically be given the option for a log-on and they will be able to go into the system. We don't allow them access to the claim, so we've created a new role profile. So one of the things that we spoke about with the LMA a lot is we do not want this masquerading under a different role profile. So if you are a broker, you will have broker access and you will not be able to do anything else. And if you are an expert or a fee collection agency, you're in your own bucket. You do not have, at the moment you have similar access to a broker, which is too much access really. And so what we've created is a very specific role profile that gives the experts and the fee collection agencies the access to the system and the data that they require in order to do their job effectively. So from a raising fee, adding information to support that request of a fee, and then tracking the progress of that fee through carrier agreement and technical processing, if it's Lloyd's, is available to them via the portal. So although, yes, parallel UCRs are gone, the functionality for third parties to collect fees will still be available.
Thank you, Sean. Any follow-on questions relating to the parallel UCRs?
One up on the top right. Yeah.
Hi, Debbie Woodson
Just on that then, with that change, does that mean that the market service Gemini will no longer?
No. So we've been working with Gemini to make sure that they are still able to do what they need to do. They've been very persistent, as you can imagine. What we haven't done actually is looked at testing and how they'll be involved in that. I don't know whether, Ray, we want to look at fee collections as part of Vanguard. Not to put you too much on the spot, but I don't think that's something that's covered yet, whether it's a yes or a no, but I think it's not a question. I'm just saying we probably need to just, but you're right, Debbie, it's something that we haven't considered. So it's a good gap spot.
Ray said it's a great idea. Thank you, Ray. There's another question at the top right. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so just on that parallel UCR, so where does that fee transaction sit or live in terms of the evidence and the agreement? And if there's no parallel UCR for it to live, is it going to be a new sequence within the claim itself, or where's it going to live?
Could you answer the...
Do you want to repeat the question?
Yeah, so where would the UCR fit?
So
Sorry.
parallel UCR, so
Yep.
you normally raise a transaction against a parallel UCR for that fee collection, and you have your documentation and your agreement would live within that parallel UCR. So the parallel UCRs are no more. Where are we evidencing that agreement?
Yeah, so where we evidence the agreement for that parallel UCR?
So it will become another transaction. So again, so it'll become transaction 4. And like I say, the only reason we have parallel UCRs was a historical workaround because we had to have a way of hiding core claim information from participants that weren't privy to it effectively. So that's why we did that before, because we didn't have the flexibility within the system to be able to hide information or create new role profiles. But yeah, so if you've got transaction, first notification of loss is TR1, subsequent with settlement is TR2, and then your TR3 would be a fee effectively. So it will all sit within the same claim file as it does today. It just would have a normal claim sequence number as opposed to a parallel.
And I assume the brokers on the claim file will understand that the sequencing's then changed because their number 4 might be actually number 5 now.
So the question was around the brokers and whether they'll be made aware and what they know. The sequencing numbers.
So sequencing from a broker is a good point, and so actually is a good point, yeah. And what we might need to do is make it a 1A, but yeah, that is a good point. So in terms of how it won't have a separate UCR, but we might have to reference it slightly differently, and that kind of links into we're looking at the moment how there is a parallel UCR field in the messaging, and how we use that parallel UCR field, and it might be the reference that we add to that field to identify as a fee is the one that the transaction reference takes. But it's a good point.
It is worth noting that in the new system, claim movements can operate in parallel. So you can have 7 of these expert fees, collecting, and then you have my 2 on loss and 1 on expenses, and all of them can be queried, approved, rejected individually in parallel. So that's important to note. It's not longer in sequence as it happens to the NECF, so it shouldn't stop any.
Okay, thank you. I think there's a question in the front. Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions. It's Heather from MS Amlin. Just a couple of questions about how we can do some of the testing. So you talked about there being migrated data now. How will we be able to test our data's been migrated fully and that we're happy with it? And secondly, what data will be available in the test system to test reach back?
So it depends on what test option you take. So for Vanguard, there will be considerable support, and so data will be created by Valonetic and by and Ray standing up, so you can correct me when I get this wrong. So there will be test data available for you to use. Within the Limos coordinated testing, there will be, your counterpart will be creating the data, and if you choose to test alone, then you'd be responsible for that. So in terms of test data, it very much depends on what test option you choose.
I was thinking more about if you've got an in-flight claim and you're creating a new movement against it, but everything else has been in the old system, how would we test that scenario?
So you can still test it. So in part of the customer testing environment, you will have, so we will seed a fake old claim in a fake class environment, and then you will create a new movement in the new test environment, and then it will reach back and simulate the reach back on the live. So for customer testing, it would be replicated, that functionality of reach back into the old. Of course, you cannot reach back into the old live, so you won't be able to get a claim for Boeing. You will be able to get a synthetic claim and then you'll reach back into it. And your first question was about data integrity. So when we actually go live in the cutover, and how do I know that my Boeing claim is, it's properly migrated so we have, as part of the cutover plan, the largest part of the migration is the IMR document repository. So that's over 80 million documents that will be migrated from the mainframe to the cloud. And all other tables, claims, deferred installments, or any other tables that we migrate will go through the same. So normally it's a two-step process. So it's data integrity and random checking as well. So you have a data integrity algorithms that actually check that all the files were correctly and nothing, correctly migrated and nothing got corrupted in the middle. So those are system checks. And then we will have what we call smoke test or random, where actual users log in and we go randomly and we actually see and compare side by side between something that is in the IMR mainframe, for example, an IMR cloud, and you'll see, yes, this is exactly what I was expecting. They can go and check. So normally that's the way it's done.
Yeah, just to add to what Alvaro is saying over there, it's fortunate that we've actually got quite a bit of experience in this because we've just done this. We did the whole migration between data centers, which is pretty much a similar task because we're not transforming data to a major extent. We're actually just moving data. We're moving it from a physical location in a data center into the cloud. So we've already got routines that we've run in the past with the DSM migration that we'll rerun and go, right, do the checksums match up? Are we okay that the report we ran on the mainframe matches the report we're running in AWS? So all of that will be evidenced, and we'll evidence in a very similar manner to the data center move.
Thank you. What's at the back?
Anthony Freeman, DocuSoft. Alvaro, you just said something there around being able to handle messages out of sequence in a sense, yeah? So that's new information. And I'm just curious because the specs, so we're a right-back vendor, the specs that are up on the Velonetic site are 8 years old, and we're told to work off those, but that's brand new information. So where do we get that information that these fundamental changes that you just suggested there, where do we get that information?
So first of all, being able to process parallel claim movements has been a feature of the platform since the inception of Blueprint 2, actually. So it has been 2.5 years inside. In fact, it was one of the requirements from the customers that came out of the claims pods that we are honoring that requirement, something that we wanted to improve in the platform. So it's not a new thing in the last few months. Nevertheless, regardless on how it was or not communicated, it is a function of the claim movement. It is not a messaging functionality. It is a claim movement functionality. So you can have 7 claim movements and agree one, query 2, and reject the other one in any order in the system. How does that affect write-back messages for DocuSoft? Well, your claim movements, your messages relate to each of the claim movements. So we can test, if there's any problem with the sequences, because it shouldn't have a problem. But again, it's not a messaging change in any shape or form. It's a behavioral of the agreement of the claim change. But definitely, let's test it and let's make sure that the assumptions are correct. Yeah.
But it's elements like that we're just not aware of, and we don't know where to go to get that information. And again, we hear that just verbally, but is there documentation that as a...
Marek, hello. Could I ask you to pick this up with DocuSoft and join up the dots on that? But certainly any queries like that, and I know that this is new news to you, but anything like that, Marek will be able to pick up and make sure you get the answers that you need.
I just have a couple more
Yeah,
questions.
Yep.
Ray, probably just for you, it was mentioned in the last session, vendor vanguard. So again, obviously we want to be on board with that, but we were just wondering when information about that would come out.
Hello, can you hear me on this? Hi Anthony, yes, you'll be hearing that in the next couple of weeks. Since the decision to include vendors within Vanguard was made in December, we've been working on a plan about how that would work. We're going to be speaking to you and all of the other vendors who will be a part of that in the next couple of weeks with a view to starting testing as the EDI specifications and others become available as part of the build, February, March kind of time. So you'll be hearing from myself and from Marek, who, to be fair, only saw the scope of this morning, in the next week or two. To be fair, he only saw it.
Just one clarification. So, again, in December, it was mentioned that early site functionality testing will be available in February, and I think it was mentioned here it was March now. Is that correct? Oh, it's February. Okay, oh, that's grand. And just for the right back connectivity testing, will that be available in January? I think that's what was mentioned.
February is right back connectivity testing.
Okay.
So, Anthony, I will be at the right back user group on Monday, and I have the very long list of questions that we'll be talking through. So we're gonna so spoke to Bob and Seb this morning. We're gonna James and Seb this morning. I'm going to get the answers to the questions documented and sent back to them so they can go out with the pack, and the idea is that they can be reviewed before we go into the sessions and then just discuss any of the exceptions. But I appreciate that there's still a lot of uncertainty around right back, and hopefully we can start to clarify some of that come Monday.
Thanks for your questions. We've got about 10 minutes remaining of this session here, so we'll start to draw to a close in about 5 minutes or so.
Got one on the front.
What do we have? Paul, go one up.
Thanks. This question is inspired by Helen's one earlier about the stuff that's in training, what you're going to do with that. So the Nirvana's reach, we reach a world of clean data, one-touch data, faster transactions, and everyone's happy. We've reached the Nirvana. What happens to all the detritus? Is there a plan to clear up all the track premiums, track claims that were set for some of them for decades? Sorry.
Who'd like to take that one?
I think it's more of a business question, right, than a tech question. And I think from a technical perspective, those claims aren't going anywhere. Those premiums will still be within the data lake, so they're still going to be there. I think really the question is more to the market in terms of how do we collectively look at, and we have the statics program for Lloyds, and there are ways of making sure that claims remain current. We don't necessarily have that for premiums, and we have so many unpaid delinked premiums, and it's that kind of stuff. I don't think we're really in control of how to progress those. We can definitely be a seat at that table. I think it needs to be led by the market in terms of how we then progress those. For us to make decisions, I think it would probably end up in anarchy, because we would be probably just deleting them all, and that's not the right answer either.
Rob up there's waving frantically.
Just on that point around premium stuff, Lloyds Market, we've been running for the last 4 years an annual purge of any unpaid D-Link premiums that are more than 3 years old, and we're now just started the 2020 purge. So for Lloyds, with complete support of LIBA and the broker community, we are tidying up.
So I won't repeat that fully, but Rob Myers from the LMA just confirmed at Lloyds for the last 4 years or so we've been doing a purge activity, and in fact we go back a lot further than that. I know with Peter Montanaro back in. Sorry? Yeah, no, and Louise, yeah, please.
Yeah, Louise Day here, IUA. I can reply for the company market. There was no financial benefit to the market, the company market, for deleting the delinked messages. Whereas for the Lloyds market, it frees up tax money. They get a refund. So we've done nothing on that because there's no benefit.
Thank you,
a lot of cost.
And then just coming back to Sean's point over there, this is truly an actual business decision over there, because you mentioned while you're talking about the legacy and the legacy data over there, you went one touch, simple, easy. That applies to New World. We can't apply one touch, simple, easy to something that's 30 years old that's got hardly any of the information that we need to be able to go to a one touch type system. So that will always be hamstrung until it's cleansed by business.
Thanks, Ruin. Probably time for 2 more questions. Yes, please.
Hi, Vikas from DocuSoft. Just to follow on the parallel UCR questions, Sean. What's the impact to in-flight parallel UCRs? How do you see that working?
So all parallel UCRs, if they're still in an in-flight transaction status, would need to be dealt with like any other transaction. and then parallel UCRs will be added. So they'll be added to the data lake, just like any other transaction. What we haven't worked through yet, because the expert CCN is still being finalised, is how we label them within the data lake. So they will need to be labelled as a fee. We've changed the process within the new world, and that we can actually label something a fee or indemnity via a radio button. So we need to make sure that where it has a parallel UCR, even if we're not pulling that parallel UCR across into the new data lake, we're actually making sure that the indicator that makes it a fee is ticked. So we're still working through that.
And just the impact of write back messaging. So if it's all going to be under one claim, what's the impact to the end-to-end kind of Gemini? Because there's a lot that's dependent on the identifier of a parallel UCR currently for the Gemini process as well.
So what we put into that parallel UCR field is yet undecided. So once the CCN's agreed and contracted, we can start the lower level analysis on it. At the moment, we have an understanding of what the role profile needs to look like. We have some impact areas, but we haven't actually done any proper analysis on it. So what we will do once we have that green light to be able to look at it formally, we can actually start looking at that. And it's likely that people like Docasoft and other vendors, we're going to need, like we do for other things, validations, have market 3 in a box groups to walk through some of the issues and get the information that we need on the table.
Yeah, Sean's bang on over there. The minute we've finalised the space in which we go deliver experts, which replaces parallel UCRs, we'll then do exactly what we've done with any other epic. We'll bring it to the market and go, here's the proposal, give us feedback if there's something that needs adjusting or fixing.
You guys have a head start on this with us though, because we've been talking about it for about 2 months, so you can come with your questions rather than us having to present it and then go away and think about it. So hopefully we can resolve a lot of this, and if we get the right people in the right room, and we're looking at the associations to help us with that, and Marek from a vendor perspective, I don't think it's a particularly difficult thing. There's lots to consider, but I think there's definitely an easy way forward.
Just to follow on write back. So you mentioned before Christmas sequence numbering, and you're looking at options around it. Is there an update you can provide?
Not yet. So we recognise that us restarting write-back sequence numbers is going to cause significant problems for a lot of people. So we are looking at having that as one of the data migration points that we pull across when we bring the information that we can't replicate or we can't get via reachback, or that we actually need in order to be able to do processing from day one. The write-back sequencing number is one of the things that we've added to that.
When you say sequencing, do you mean the claim sequencing or is the
no,
carrier?
the message sequencing. Yeah.
The message sequencing. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Team took a Christmas break. They're back on it now.
So time for one last question. Yes, please.
Thanks, Steve. David Ambridge at Aquashore Re. One final question around the cutover, 1st of July. How confident are we that that won't be moved?
We've got a number of gates. Sorry, and you probably want to answer this.
I'm going to answer. I'm confident.
But we have a number of gates that we have to go through in order to get to that. So, we're not just going to hope that July works. We've got a number of gates that start from probably in about 2 weeks that make sure that we're hitting those gates. So when we stand up here and we tell you we're on track, that's everything. That's not just we're on track to deliver the next sequence of work or the next build. We're on track to deliver. And until we stand up here and start telling you that actually we're starting to miss stuff, then we're confident.
And what's the sort of the last point you'd get to where you think this?
I think it was May. Is that currently where we are? I mean, it'll all be in the cutover plan.
It's not as easy to say this one date. Yeah, let's be very clear. Between now and probably mid-June, because if we're not ready in mid-June, there's no way we're cutting over 2 weeks later. There's a lot of work to be done. From what we can see today, there's a path to green to get that work done and get it done at the right level of quality that we can look, numerous people, me, my board, then the regulator, then the associations, then the market customers, etc., in the eye and go, yeah, we're good to go. As we go through that, we've got a lot of gates to pass and milestones to achieve. As we've said, we'll produce a relatively robust, these are the things that need to happen by these dates in order to be green, on that date. including what we need to do, but also what we want the market to do. You know, limiting amount of open data at the point of cutover helps everyone. Yeah, as we stand here today, I'm pretty confident that we have a path through it to get there. I think the detail we're working this month is exactly what does July 1 mean, because easy for me to say, July 1, go to bed, wake up, you know, we flick the switch, everybody's running. We know there's going to be blackout periods. We know we're going to have to cleanse. We know we're going to have to move data. Exactly how we work through that over those days, that's what we'll publish towards the end of this month. Is that okay?
Yeah, Chris, just want to add one to that. So selfishly putting a build hat on over here and looking at it from a build perspective, we've actually changed the whole build operate model come the start of this year. We were monitoring the build on a quarterly basis. We're now down to a fortnightly basis. So I've got health checks with the teams on a fortnightly basis now to check in, is there anything that's slipping? Is there anything that's moving? So the pulse is now every fortnight that we've got a sense check on, are we on track? Are we hitting the dates? So we're really stepping up the game with regards to that to ensure that if something is moving, we get early visibility of it so that we can react to it. So we're keeping very, very close eyes on these items to make sure that we stay on track.
Thank you, Wayne. So for me to close, I didn't want to cut you off short because I think it's a really important question. It's good to hear the thoughts here. Final slide. None of this is new to you. Hopefully this has all been communicated by your engagement partner. Please do take a picture, but I'm sure we can make these slides available to you afterwards as well. The adoption guide, very important guide for you to get your heads into. The model office up on Gallery 3 at Lloyd's, Blueprint 2 website. The training site, which is getting more materials being added to it as we go through. Vanguard program, any questions? If you're in part of Vanguard, speak to your project manager, speak to Ray Johnston if you need any additional support. Market events, importantly, we've got the next big market event on the 26th of February. Save your dates will be going out in the next week or so, I believe, but mark it out, it'll be in the afternoon. It's a Monday event, such as the previous events have been. But all that remains for me to do is to thank the panel very much. I know fun. Thank you very much for coming along today. I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, please do direct them to your engagement partner, direct them to me, put them on the Q&A log on Blueprint 2 website. And thank you very much. Have a very nice afternoon. Thank you.